Clara hummed softly, her fingers tracing the faded lines on her sheet music. It wasn't just paper to her. It was a map to her soul. Every note, every chord, every whispered lyric in The Lonely Heart's Serenade was a piece of herself, a fragment of raw emotion she'd poured out late at night, fueled by strong coffee and an ache in her chest. She was only 18, fresh out of her small town, and the bustling, noisy streets of Nashville felt both terrifying and exhilarating. This was it, her big break, or at least her big chance to try for one. She clutched her worn briefcase, the leather scuffed from countless journeys, mostly on foot across the city. Inside, protected by layers of tissue paper, was the pristine copy of her song. Not a scratch, not a smudge. It had to be perfect. She'd managed to secure an appointment, a tiny sliver of time, with one of the biggest names in the music business, Mr. Sterling. Everyone knew Mr. Sterling. He was the kind of producer who could make or break a career with a single grunt. And he was known for being brutally honest, which meant his praise was rare, but his criticism was legendary. Clara pushed open the heavy glass door of Sterling Records, the jingle of a small bell announcing her arrival. The waiting room was plush, with deep red velvet chairs and framed gold records lining the walls. Proof of the empires Mr. Sterling had built. A stern-faced receptionist barely looked up from her typewriter. "Name?" she clipped. "Clara Jensen?" Clara squeaked, her voice suddenly high and reedy. She cleared her throat. "Clara Jensen for Mr. Sterling." The receptionist pointed a long, manicured finger towards a door. "Through there. He's running late again." Clara's heart pounded. Running late? That meant less time. Less time to impress him. Less time to convince him that her song wasn't just notes on a page, but a living, breathing entity. She smoothed her skirt, took a deep breath, and walked through the door. The studio was enormous. A cavernous space filled with gleaming microphones, tangled cables, and a grand piano that seemed to hum with silent music. In the center, hunched over a large console, sat Mr. Sterling. He was a barrel of a man with thick gray hair that perpetually looked disheveled, and eyes that squinted behind heavy-rimmed glasses. He didn't look up as she entered. "You got something for me, kid?" he grumbled, his voice like gravel. Clara's hands trembled as she pulled out her sheet music. "Yes, sir, it's called The Lonely Heart's Serenade. I wrote it myself." Mr. Sterling finally looked up, his gaze sweeping over her. "Assessing." He took the sheet music, barely glancing at the title before his eyes narrowed, scanning the complex melody lines, the tricky chord progressions, the lyrics scrawled in her neat handwriting. He hummed a few notes, his brow furrowed deeper with each one. He tapped his pen against the page, a slow, deliberate rhythm that felt like a ticking clock in Clara's chest. He said, and it wasn't a good HM. It was a HME that told her he was already finding flaws. A lot of jumps here. Big range, and these key changes. He shook his head, a dismissive gesture that felt like a punch to her gut. "It's meant to convey the journey of loneliness, sir," Clara explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "From quiet despair to a hopeful, soaring release," Mr. Sterling snorted. "Hopeful, soaring release. Huh. Sounds more like a headache. Look, kid, I've heard a lot of songs in my time. Thousands. And I can tell you right now, this is ambitious." He paused, flipping through the pages, his expression growing grimmer with each turn. "Too ambitious, I'd say." Clara felt a cold dread creeping through her. She'd spent months on this song, refining every note, every word. It was her masterpiece, her truth. To hear it dismissed so quickly, so casually by a man who held so much power was devastating. But she wouldn't give up. Not yet. "But it's unique, Mr. Sterling," she pleaded, stepping closer to the console. "It's not just another love song. It has depth. It needs a voice that can truly feel it, truly live it." He finally pushed the sheet music back across the console towards her, his face a mask of practiced indifference. It has depth, all right, the depth of the Grand Canyon, and just as hard to cross, look. But this song is unsingable. No one, and I mean no one, could pull this off. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Unsingable. The cruelest word a jocker could hear. It wasn't just a critique of her song. It was a judgment on her ability to create something viable, something real. Clara's carefully constructed world of hope began to crumble around her. The grand piano in the studio no longer hummed with silent music. It felt like a tombstone. The word echoed in Clara's ears, each syllable a hammer blow to her nascent dreams. Unsingable. It hung in the air like a thick, choking fog, obscuring the bright future she'd envisioned. She stared at Mr. Sterling, her eyes wide with disbelief, her hands still trembling from the effort of holding her composure. "Unsingable, sir," she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. "But why?" Mr. Sterling leaned back in his chair, a weary sigh escaping his lips. He looked at her, as if she were a particularly stubborn child who refused to understand a simple truth. "Look, Clara, let's break it down. First, the range. You've got notes here that go from a whisper-low rumble to a soaring, near-operatic climax. Most singers have a specific range they're comfortable in asking them to stretch, like this. Espert picked up a pen and pointed to a section of the sheet music, and to do it convincingly in rapid succession, without sounding like they're having a breakdown. Nearly impossible. Clara listened, her heart sinking with each point he made. He was articulating every single challenge she had faced while writing it, every doubt she had pushed away. She'd thought the complexity was its strength, its uniqueness. Now it was her undoing. And the key changes, Mr. Sterling continued, tapping the page again. They're unconventional. They don't follow the typical patterns that's going to trip up even seasoned musicians. The band would struggle to keep up, and the singer would be constantly fighting the melody, trying to find their footing. It's like a musical op and a gesture of finality. It's too much for the singer, too much for the band, too much for the listener to follow comfortably. It's a technical nightmare dressed up as a ballad. He paused, taking a sip of coffee from a stained mug. "I appreciate your ambition, Clara. I do, but sometimes ambition outruns practicality. This song, it just isn't commercially viable. It's not something that will get played on the radio. It's a beautiful poem, maybe, but not a song that can be performed." The words cut deep. Clara had envisioned her song on the radio touching people, making them feel less alone. She had dreamed of a powerful voice, bringing her lyrics to life, transforming her quiet pain into a universal anthem. Now Mr. Sterling was telling her it was a fantasy, a pipe dream. "So you're saying no one could sing it?" Clara asked, her voice barely a whisper, a desperate last plea. Mr. Sterling met her gaze, his expression softening ever so slightly, a fleeting moment of something akin to pity. "And even then, I doubt they'd waste their time on something so challenging." He stood up, signaling the end of their meeting. "Don't give up on songwriting, Clara. Just rein it in a bit. Write something simpler, something that fits the mold, something people can sing along to. This isn't it." Clara felt a profound sadness settle over her, heavy and suffocating. She picked up her sheet music, the pages now feeling like a burden rather than a treasure. Her dreams, which had felt so vivid just moments ago, now seemed distant, hazy. She mumbled a thank you, her voice cracking, and turned to leave. As she walked out of the studio, the vibrant energy of Nashville seemed to mock her. The bustling streets, the hopeful tunes drifting from open windows, they all felt like a reminder of what she wasn't. She spent the rest of the day wandering aimlessly, the sheet music clutched in her hand, the unsingable song. Had she wasted her time? Was her vision flawed? Was she herself simply not good enough? The self-doubt began to creep in, insidious and cold, whispering that maybe Mr. Sterling was right. Maybe her dreams were too big, too complex, too impossible. She folded the music carefully, placed it back in her briefcase, and walked towards her small, rented room, feeling a profound sense of defeat she hadn't known possible. The dream of the lonely heart's serenade, being heard, truly heard, seemed to die that day. While Clara was wrestling with her shattered dreams miles away in a more opulent setting, fate was already twisting in ways she couldn't imagine. Mr. Sterling, after dismissing Clara, had tossed her sheet music onto a pile of other submissions ready for the reject bin. He barely gave it a second thought. To him, it was just another well-intentioned but ultimately impractical piece of music. But serendipity, as it often does, had a different plan. Later that afternoon, as Mr. Sterling was on the phone, a junior assistant named Millie was tasked with clearing his overflowing desk. Millie was new, eager to please, and perhaps a little too curious for her own good. As she gathered the stacks of papers, her eyes fell upon the title, The Lonely Heart's Serenade. The elegant script, the slightly unconventional title, caught her eye. She paused, her finger tracing the words. Millie was a quiet girl, a lover of poetry and classical music, and she often felt out of place in the brash commercial world of popular music. But there was something about this title that resonated with her. She glanced at the complex musical notation, which looked like intricate lace to her untrained eye, and then at the lyrics. They weren't typical pop lyrics. They were raw, vulnerable, almost poetic. Strange melody seemed to form in her head just from reading the words. Against her better judgment, and certainly against Mr. Sterling's unspoken rules, Millie didn't just toss it in the bin. Instead, she slipped the sheet music under a pile of less important papers, intending to look at it more closely. Later, maybe, just maybe, there was something special about it. She felt a connection, a tiny spark of hope that this song, with its unusual beauty, might find its way. A few days later, Elvis Presley was in Nashville. He wasn't in the studio yet, but he was always looking for new material. He was at a point in his career where he felt a slight creative itch. He'd had massive hits, sure, but he yearned for something deeper, something that would truly showcase the range of his voice and the depth of his emotion. He felt sometimes that he was being pigeonholed, asked to sing the same kinds of songs over and over. He was hungry for something that challenged him, something that would allow him to truly perform. He was staying at a grand hotel suite, surrounded by his entourage, but feeling a touch restless. Colonel Tom Parker, his manager, always had stacks of new songs for him to consider, mostly safe, commercial tunes that would guarantee airplay. Elvis would dutifully listen, sometimes trying a few bars, but rarely did anything truly excite him. This particular afternoon, a local journalist was visiting for an interview, and Millie, the junior assistant, had been sent by Mr. Sterling, reluctantly for PR purposes, to deliver some promotional photos and a stack of new potential song demos for Elvis to review. She placed the neatly organized stack on a coffee table right next to where Elvis was idly flipping through a magazine. As she turned to leave, she noticed a stray piece of sheet music just barely peeking out from under a larger promotional flyer she'd inadvertently placed on top. It was Clara's song. Millie's heart fluttered. She'd meant to take it home, but in her rush, it had gotten mixed up with the official papers. Before she could discreetly retrieve it, Elvis, with an almost uncanny intuition, reached out and plucked the lone sheet from the pile. "What's this, darlin'?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that sent a shiver down Millie's spine. His eyes scanned the title. The Lonely Hearts, stammering. "Oh, Mr. Presley, that's nothing. Just some old sheet music that got misplaced. It's probably been rejected." Elvis, however, was already looking at the first few lines of lyrics. "The silent tears, they fall like rain," he murmured, his voice soft almost to himself. He hummed a few notes, his head tilted. His thumb instinctively traced a complex chord progression. He didn't look at it like a producer calculating commercial viability. He looked at it like an artist sensing the emotion, the story within. Rejected, huh? He said, a glint in his eye. Why? Millie, intimidated but also strangely emboldened, explained. Mr. Sterling said it was unsingable. Too difficult, too many changes, too much emotion for one song. Elvis just smiled, a slow, intriguing smile that barely touched his lips. He looked at the sheet music again, a thoughtful frown replacing his smile. He seemed to be weighing the challenge, not dismissing it. Unsingable, he repeated, not with derision but with a curious, almost fascinated tone. Is that right? He folded the sheet music carefully, slipping it into his jacket pocket. Thank you, darling. You can tell Mr. Sterling I'll give this one a listen. Millie's jaw nearly dropped. She just handed Elvis Presley a song Mr. Sterling had unequivocally rejected. Cold fear, mixed with a thrilling sense of rebellion, pulsed through her. She nodded, mumbled something incoherent, and practically ran out of the suite, leaving behind a confused journalist and a very curious Elvis Presley, who now held the fate of Clara's unsingable song in his hands. Back in his suite, after the journalist had left and his entourage had dispersed for the evening, Elvis found himself alone with the crumpled sheet of music. He pulled it out, smoothing the creases with his thumb. The Lonely Heart's Serenade. He liked the title. It spoke to something raw and honest. He walked over to the grand piano that occupied a corner of his suite, a fixture in most hotel rooms he stayed in, always ready for inspiration to strike. He sat down, stretching his long fingers, and placed the sheet music on the stand. He wasn't a master sight reader, but he had an uncanny musical intuition. He could pick up a melody, feel its rhythm, and understand its emotional core just by looking at the notes and lyrics. He played the opening chords, a somber, delicate progression. His baritone voice, usually so powerful, dropped to a soft, almost vulnerable hum. The silent tears, they fall like rain washing over sorrow's stain. He followed the melody, navigating the unexpected turns, the sudden shifts in dynamics. He felt the emotional journey the song demanded, the low, mournful notes, the unexpected leap into a higher, more hopeful register. It was indeed challenging, just as the assistant had said. But as he sang, he didn't feel overwhelmed. He felt intrigued. It wasn't just a song. It was a story, a very human story. He could feel the writer's pain, her yearning for connection, her eventual glimmer of hope. It resonated with parts of himself he rarely showcased in his more commercial hit. He closed his eyes, letting the melody guide him, allowing the lyrics to seep into his very being. He wasn't thinking about radio play or record sales. He was thinking about truth. He tried it again, this time with more conviction, his voice gaining strength as he moved through the verses. The impossible range, the rapid emotional shifts, they weren't roadblocks to him. They were opportunities. Opportunities to stretch his voice, yes, but more importantly, to stretch his soul. He found himself adding subtle inflections, a slight tremor here, a powerful surge there, interpreting the notes not just as symbols, but as emotions. By the time he reached the end, a hush had fallen over the room. Though no one else was there, it felt important. It felt like something he needed to sing. He stood up, a renewed energy in his stride, picked up the phone and called his studio manager, bypassing Colonel Parker, for a moment, knowing the colonel might be too cautious. I need studio time tomorrow, Elvis said, his voice firm. Morning, just me, Scotty Bill, and DJ and the engineer. What are we recording? The manager asks, surprised by the sudden, urgent request. A new one, Elvis replied. It's called The Lonely Heart's Serenade. Got it from a new Akar. It's special. News traveled fast in the Nashville music scene. Mr. Sterling, who had been enjoying a rare moment of peace after wrapping up a difficult session, received a call from his studio manager early the next morning. Mr. Sterling, you won't believe it. Elvis is coming in this morning, wants to record The Lonely Heart's Serenade. The Lonely Heart's Serenade, he spluttered. That unsingable drivel, are you sure? That's what he said, sir. and he specifically requested his usual band and engineer. He's serious. A scowl settled on Mr. Sterling's face. This was ridiculous. Elvis was wasting his time, his talent, and the studio's money on a song that was practically a joke. Pictured the amateurish sheet music, the impossible vocal demands, he had dismissed it outright. Now Elvis the King was going to try and prove him wrong. Mr. Sterling wasn't thrilled. He was skeptical, even annoyed. He decided he had to be there. If only to witness the inevitable struggle, to confirm his own judgment, he needed to see Elvis fail. Meanwhile, Clara, oblivious to the whirlwind her song was causing, was still feeling the sting of Mr. Sterling's rejection. She was trying to write something else, something simpler, as he had suggested. But every melody she tried to conjure fell flat, every lyric hollow. Her heart wasn't in it. She heard the faint buzz of activity from the nearby studios, the arrival of famous musicians, the hum of equipment, but it felt distant part of a world she didn't belong to. She certainly didn't imagine her unsingable song was at the center of it all. The next morning, the RCA Studio B in Nashville was alive with a nervous energy. It was always special when Elvis came to record, but today felt different. There was a peculiar hum of anticipation, an undercurrent of curiosity that mingled with the usual excitement. Word had spread, thanks to Mr. Sterling's incredulous phone calls, that Elvis was attempting the Lonely Heart's Serenade, the song everyone in the know had deemed impossible. Scotty Moore, the legendary guitarist, strummed a few chords on his hollow body, a thoughtful frown on his face. Bill Black on bass ran a practiced finger over his strings, his eyes scanning the sheet music they'd been given. DJ Fontana sat behind his drum kit, tapping the rhythm, listening to the unusual time signatures. They were all pros used to adapting to Elvis's spontaneous decisions, but this song was unlike anything they'd seen before. The notes jumped, the melody twisted, and the emotional landscape was vast and complex. They'd tried a few runs together earlier, and it hadn't been easy even for them. Mr. Sterling arrived, a cloud of skepticism hanging around him like a personal fog. He marched straight to the control booth, giving gruff nods to the engineer and a few other studio personnel. He hadn't slept well. Still, annoyed that Elvis was wasting valuable studio time on such a misguided venture. He crossed his arms, his expression a mixture of annoyance and grim expectation. He was ready for the inevitable flubs, the numerous takes, the eventual capitulation. Then the studio door swung open and a ripple went through the room. Elvis Presley walked in, not with his usual boisterous energy, but with a quiet, focused intensity. He wore a simple shirt and slacks, looking relaxed but utterly determined. His eyes swept over the musicians, giving each a warm but firm nod. Elvis gave a small, knowing smile. "It's more than interesting, Scotty. It's important." He walked directly to the microphone, not bothering with warm-ups, just a quick adjustment of the stand. He held the sheet music in his hand, not to read, but as if it were a talisman. He looked at the first line, then closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. Mr. Sterling scoffed softly from the control booth, but his expression was hidden behind the glass. "This is going to be a disaster," he muttered to the engineer, who simply shrugged, accustomed to Mr. Sterling's dramatics. In the midst of this controlled chaos, Clara was having her own quiet internal crisis. She hadn't been able to focus on anything all morning. The rejection from Mr. Sterling had left a hollow ache in her chest. She wandered near the studio, drawn by an invisible pull she couldn't explain. She knew Elvis was in town, and a part of her, the fan, the aspiring artist, longed to simply be near the creative energy, even if she couldn't be a part of it. She saw the familiar face of Millie, the junior assistant, bustling out of the studio. Clara gathered her courage. "Millie, excuse me, I'm Clara Jensen. I was here a few days ago with Mr. Sterling." Millie stopped, her eyes widening slightly in recognition. "Oh, Clara. Yes, I remember. I'm so sorry about your song." Millie trailed off, glancing nervously back at the studio door. "It's all right," Clara said. Though it wasn't. I heard Elvis's recording today. Is there any chance I could just peek in from the back? I'm just a huge admirer." Millie hesitated. Mr. Sterling would never approve. But then she remembered the strange twist of fate, the way the song had ended up in Elvis's hands, and she remembered the hope in Clara's eyes just a few days ago. This was Clara's song, even if she didn't know it yet. Maybe she deserved to see this. "All right," Millie said, leaning in conspiratorially. "Follow me. But stay absolutely silent. And in the back, Mr. Sterling is in one of his moods." Clara's heart leaped. A small victory, a tiny reprieve from her sadness. She followed Millie through a side door past a labyrinth of soundproofing and into the main studio space. She hugged the back wall, trying to make herself as small and unnoticeable as possible. The room was bathed in a warm amber light, and the air was thick with anticipation. She saw Elvis at the mix, saw his band ready, Mr. Sterling glaring from the booth. She wondered what song they were about to record. Whatever it was, it had to be important, given the king's presence. She braced herself, ready to witness the magic, unaware that the magic about to unfold was born from her own unsingable dream. A hush fell over the studio. Even the usually bustling engineers in a control booth seemed to hold their breath. Elvis stood before the microphone, a silent statue of intent. He nodded to Scotty Bill and DJ, a small signal that transcended words. The band members exchanged quick glances, a mix of apprehension and excitement in their eyes. They knew the challenge ahead. Scotty Moore's fingers danced across his guitar, sending out the first delicate notes of The Lonely Heart's Serenade. The melody was instantly recognizable to Clara, even though she'd only ever heard it played by her own tentative fingers on a cheap piano. Her breath hitched. It was her song. Her heart slammed against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Disbelief, shock, and a surge of terror washed over her. Why was Elvis singing her song? How did he even have it? Bill Black joined in his bass line, a steady, mournful pulse, followed by DJ Fontana's subtle, brush-stroked drums. The band played the intro, tentative at first, feeling their way through the unfamiliar, complex arrangement. From the control booth, Mr. Sterling watched, his lips curled into a smirk. "Hear that?" he muttered to the engineer. "Even they're struggling. This is going to be a train wreck." He leaned forward, expecting Elvis to stumble, to falter, to prove his earlier judgment correct. Then Elvis opened his mouth. His voice, a low, resonant hum, filled the studio. The silent tears. They fall like rain washing over sorrow's stain. Clara gasped. A tiny choked sound that thankfully went unheard in the vast room. It was her lyric, her melody. But it wasn't just her melody anymore. It was transformed. Elvis wasn't just singing the words, he was embodying them. His voice was a vessel for the raw emotion she had poured onto the page. He navigated the opening verse with a tender vulnerability she hadn't even known was possible. The low notes, which Mr. Sterling had called a rumble, were perfectly placed, imbued with a quiet despair that sent shivers down Clara's spine. He wasn't straining, he was simply there in the depth of the emotion. As the song progressed, the melody began its ascent, leading to one of the impossible key changes Mr. Sterling had highlighted. Clara held her breath, her eyes fixed on Elvis. This was it, the part that would surely trip him up. But Elvis didn't stumble. His voice transitioned backly, effortlessly from one key to the next, rising with a controlled power that was breathtaking. He hit the notes Clara had worried about. Most the ones she had feared were too high, too demanding, but in his voice, they sounded natural, a part of the song's organic flow. He didn't just sing them, he reached for them, not with effort, but with an almost spiritual grace. His famous vocal control was on full display, a master craftsman at work. Mr. Sterling's smirk slowly faded, his brow furrowed, but not in annoyance, in contemplation. His eyes, initially filled with doubt, began to widen. He leaned closer to the glass, his usual cynical demeanor beginning to crack. He heard the notes, yes, but more importantly, he heard the feeling. The way Elvis was caressing each lyric, shaping it, giving it a life beyond what was written on the page. The band, too, seemed to fall into a trance. Scotty's guitar, which had been tentative, now began to weave around Elvis's voice, adding flourishes and harmonies that perfectly complemented the melody. Bill's bass found a confident groove, and DJ's drums became the heartbeat of the song, responsive to every nuance. They weren't just playing, they were listening, reacting, creating something new and powerful in real time. Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest, chasing away the cold dread that had settled there. This was her song, and it was being sung by the king, not just sung, but exalted. Her eyes welled up tears, blurring her vision, but she didn't dare wipe them away. She didn't want to miss a single second. The unsingable song was being sung, and it was astounding. The studio was no longer just a room with musicians and equipment. It was a sanctuary, a sacred space where something truly profound was unfolding. Elvis wasn't merely performing the Lonely Heart's Serenade. He was breathing life into it, transforming it from a complex composition into a raw, pulsating expression of human emotion. He wasn't just hitting notes, he was hitting hearts. As the song moved into its middle section, the part Clara had envisioned as a desperate plea, Elvis's voice deepened, imbued with a profound yearning. He seemed to pull the pain from deep within himself, channeling it into every syllable. His eyes were closed, his head tilted back slightly, as if listening to an inner voice, or perhaps reaching for the very source of the song's truth. The microphone was just a conduit. His voice was a current. The emotional shifts, which Mr. Sterling had deemed impossible to navigate without sounding forced, flowed. Elvis moved from vulnerability to strength, from quiet despair to a sudden soaring hope, with an effortless grace that defied logic. He didn't just sing the words, he lived them. The triumph in the bridge, the quiet resignation in the final verse, it was all there, authentically conveyed, without a single moment of disconnect. From the control booth, Mr. Sterling was utterly captivated. His initial smirk had vanished completely, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated awe. His jaw was slack, his glasses slightly askew. He had seen countless artists, recorded hundreds of sessions, but he had never witnessed anything quite like this. He had called the song unsingable, a technical nightmare. Yet here was Elvis, not just singing it, but making it sound inevitable, as if it was written just for his voice, for his soul. The band members were equally enthralled. Scotty, usually stoic, had a wide grin on his face, his guitar responding with newfound passion, almost as if it too were swept up in the magic. Bill and DJ locked into a rhythm that pulsed with the song's heartbeat, their instruments becoming extensions of Elvis's voice, providing a perfect, seamless backdrop. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty. They were simply flowing. Carried by the current of his genius, Clara, pressed against the back wall, was silently weeping. Hot tears streamed down her face, but they were tears of overwhelming joy and profound recognition. This was her song, yes, but it was also his song now. He had found every hidden nuance, every unspoken emotion she had woven into the lyrics and melody. He had given voice to the deepest parts of her soul, parts she hadn't even fully understood until she heard them sung by him. It was more beautiful, more powerful, more everything than she had ever dreamed. The most astounding part was the one-take aspect. There were no false starts, no requests to stop and try again, no stumbles, no fumbled notes, no forgotten lyrics. It was as if Elvis had known the song intimately for years, had practiced it countless times, even though he had only just seen it. It was raw intuition, pure talent, and an unparalleled connection to the music. Every breath was perfectly placed, every inflection deliberate, every note resonating with truth. The air in the studio thickened with the palpable emotion emanating from Elvis. The song swelled to its hopeful climax, his voice rising strong and clear, then gently receding, echoing the bittersweet peace that followed the Lonely Heart's Serenade. It was a journey, and Elvis was the master guide, leading everyone in the room through its intricate paths. As the final sustained note began to fade, a profound silence descended, heavier and more profound than any noise. It was the silence of shared wonder, of having witnessed something truly extraordinary. Clara, still crying silently, felt her heart expand, filled with a mixture of awe and gratitude. She had brought a song into the world, and Elvis Presley had just lifted it to the heavens. The last lingering echo of Elvis's voice faded into the meticulously soundproofed walls of the studio. For a long moment, an almost reverent silence hung in the air, thick with the weight of what had just transpired. No one moved, no one spoke. It was as if the very molecules in the room were still vibrating with the power of the performance. Then a collective exhale, a quiet sigh of release rippled through the control booth and the studio floor. It wasn't just admiration. It was wonder, relief, and something akin to a spiritual awakening. From the control booth, Mr. Sterling was the first to break his frozen posture. He slowly pushed himself away from the console, his eyes wide and unblinking. His usual gruff demeanor had completely vanished, replaced by an expression of utter bewilderment, tinged with a grudging respect he hadn't known he possessed. He looked at the engineer, then back at the studio, as if trying to confirm what he had just heard was real, that he hadn't imagined the perfection. "I'll be damned," he murmured, his voice hoarse, barely audible. He actually did it. One take, just one, and it was God, it was magnificent." He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair, still processing the impossible. His unsingable song had not only been sung, it had been transformed into a masterpiece. On the studio floor, Scotty, Bill, and DJ looked at each other, wide grins slowly spreading across their faces. They were Elvis's band, accustomed to his brilliance, but even they were visibly moved. Scotty gently lowered his guitar, shaking his head in disbelief and admiration. "Well, I'll be," he chuckled softly. "That boy, he just takes your breath away, doesn't he?" Bill nodded, still holding his bass. "He didn't just sing it, Scotty. He owned it. Made it sound like the easiest thing in the world." DJ slid off his drum stool, giving a low whistle. "Never seen anything like it. Not a single misstep, not one." Elvis himself stood by the microphone, his chest rising and falling rhythmically. He still had that quiet, focused intensity. But there was also a profound sense of satisfaction in his eyes. He didn't preen or grandstand. He simply gave a small, humble nod to his band, a silent acknowledgement of their shared creation. He wasn't focused on ego. He was focused on the music, on the truth he had just conveyed. He knew he had done something special, not for the applause, but for the song itself. Then he turned slightly, his gaze sweeping over the silent studio. His eyes landed on the small, huddled figure pressed against the back wall. She was still standing there, tears silently streaming down her face, her hands clasped tightly over her mouth to stifle any sound. She felt utterly exposed, yet strangely seen. Elvis's eyes, usually so commanding, softened. He had sensed her presence, a quiet, almost fragile energy throughout the session. He walked slowly, deliberately, towards her, the few steps across the studio floor, feeling like a journey. Clara's heart pounded. She hadn't expected him to even notice her, let alone approach. She tried to wipe her tears, but more kept coming. She felt a mix of immense gratitude and utter embarrassment. "You all right, darling?" Elvis asked, his voice low and kind, a stark contrast to the raw power he'd just unleashed. He offered her a clean handkerchief from his pocket. Clara took it, her fingers trembling. "Yes, Mr. Presley," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. It was beautiful. So beautiful." She couldn't bring herself to confess. It was her song, not yet. The moment felt too fragile, too perfect. From the control booth, Mr. Sterling, still in a daze, watched the interaction. He saw Elvis offering the girl a handkerchief, a gesture of unexpected tenderness. He remembered the young woman from a few days ago, the one whose song he had dismissed as unsingable. He had seen her earlier when she walked in with Millie, but his focus had been on Elvis. Now, as he watched them, A sudden dawning realization hit him. The sheet music he had summarily dismissed, the young woman who had written it, the name Clara Jensen. A cold wave of mortification washed over Mr. Sterling. He had been so wrong, so profoundly, unforgivably wrong, and the proof of his error was now a magnificent, breathtaking reality, performed by the greatest singer on the planet. He had to say something, he had to do something. The unyielding producer, the man of granite, felt a crack in his formidable facade. Mr. Sterling, feeling a rare pang of humility, pushed open the door of the control booth and stepped onto the studio floor. His heavy footsteps seemed loud in the still reverberating silence. Elvis and Clara turned their heads as he approached. "Presley," Mr. Sterling said, his voice still gruff but now tinged with an unfamiliar awe. "That was something else. I've never heard anything like it." He cleared his throat, avoiding Clara's gaze for a moment. "That song I told the Tokoer, it was unsingable. I told her no one could pull it off." Elvis's gaze drifted to Clara, then back to Mr. Sterling, a knowing look in his eyes. "Well, I guess some things are only unsingable until the right person sings them. Ain't that right, Mr. Sterling?" His voice was gentle, but the underlying meaning was clear. Clara, her heart pounding, finally found her voice. "Mr. Presley," she began, her voice still shaky, "that song, The Lonely Heart's Serenade, I wrote it." Mr. Sterling visibly flinched. His face, usually a mask of hardened experience, now showed a flicker of discomfort, almost embarrassment. He looked at Clara, then at the sheet music still clutched in Elvis's hand. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. The junior assistant Millie must have accidentally given it to Elvis, bypassing his reject pile. A deep sigh escaped him. Elvis's smile widened. He looked from Clara to Mr. Sterling. "Well, I knew it was special, darling," he said to Clara, his eyes warm and sincere. "This ain't unsingable. This is truth. This is a beautiful, beautiful song. It spoke right to my soul the moment I saw it." He gestured to the sheet music. "You got a gift, Clara. A real gift." Clara felt a fresh wave of tears, but this time they were purely joyful. To hear those words from Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, the man who had just poured his heart into her creation, it was more validation than she could have ever dreamed. The pain of Mr. Sterling's rejection melted away, replaced by an intoxicating sense of triumph. Mr. Sterling finally turned fully to Clara. His posture was still stiff, but the harshness in his eyes had softened. "Clara," he began, his voice surprisingly subdued, I was wrong, completely wrong. I misjudged this one, and you..." He paused, a deep breath filling his barrel chest. This was perhaps the closest he had ever come to an apology. "I should have known better. It takes a certain kind of vision to write something like this, and it takes a certain artistry to perform it." He looked at Elvis, a rare flicker of admiration in his gaze. "But your song, Clara, it's a masterpiece, it truly is." Clara could only nod, tears still streaming down her face. She was too overwhelmed to speak. The man who had crushed her dreams just days ago was now praising her, admitting his mistake. It was a moment of profound validation, not just for her song, but for her artistic vision. Elvis, sensing the emotional weight of the moment, stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on Clara's shoulder. "Don't you ever let anyone tell you your art is unsingable, darlin'," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "If it comes from the heart, there's always a way to bring it to life. And you, Clara, you wrote something that will touch millions." He then turned to Mr. Sterling. "So, Mr. Sterling," he said, a playful glint in his eye, "what's the next step? We got ourselves a hit record here, don't we?" Mr. Sterling, still reeling but starting to regain his composure, nodded slowly. "Yes, Elvis, yes we do. More than a hit, I think. This is going to be a classic." He looked at Clara again, a different kind of calculation in his eyes, now one of respect and opportunity. "Clara, we need to talk about more songs, about your future. This is just the beginning." The studio, which had been a place of despair for Clara, was now filled with hope and promise. The raw, beautiful sound of The Lonely Heart's Serenade was still echoing in the air, a testament to Clara's talent and Elvis's unparalleled genius. It was a heartwarming moment, a validation of art, of dreams, and of the power of a single song to change everything. Clara, for the first time in days, felt the warmth of the Nashville sun truly touch her skin. Her dreams weren't crushed. They were soaring, carried on the wings of Elvis's magnificent voice. The release of The Lonely Heart's Serenade was unlike anything the music world had seen in years. It wasn't just another hit. It was a phenomenon. Radio stations, initially hesitant due to the song's unconventional structure, were inundated with requests. People couldn't get enough of it. Elvis's rendition was spellbinding, a master class in emotional delivery that resonated deeply with listeners, touched their own lonely hearts, making them feel understood, seen. The critics raved. They spoke of Elvis's maturity, his unparalleled vocal prowess, and his ability to transform a challenging piece into something universally accessible and profoundly moving. The narrative of the unsingable song became part of its mystique. Mr. Sterling surprisingly became a reluctant part of the legend. He publicly admitted his initial skepticism, which only added to the song's Cinderella story. Highlighting the genius required to overcome such a flawed composition, he now spoke of Clara with respect, even pride, as if he had always championed her. Clara Jensen, the young, aspiring joker, found herself catapulted into the spotlight. Interviews, fan mail, offers from other artists, her life changed overnight. She went from struggling to make ends meet to becoming one of Nashville's most sought-after lyricists. She signed a proper publishing deal with Mr. Sterling's company, and this time he treated her with genuine deference. He assigned a dedicated team to her, ensuring her creative output was nurtured, not stifled. But more than the fame and fortune, it was the profound sense of validation that truly filled Clara's heart. Her song, her raw, vulnerable truth had been heard. And not just heard, but cherished, loved, and given immortal life by the king himself. She often thought back to that day in the studio, the hush, the sound of Elvis's voice filling the room, and her own silent tears. It was a memory she held dearer than any royalty check. She continued to write, but with a newfound confidence. Her songs were still deeply emotional, still unique, but now she knew they had a place in the world. She understood that sometimes the greatest art comes from pushing boundaries, from daring to be unsingable. Elvis himself often spoke of The Lonely Heart's Serenade as one of his most cherished recordings. It represented a moment of artistic purity for him, a challenge met and transcended. It was a song that allowed him to explore the deeper dimensions of his artistry, reminding the world that he was more than just a hip-swiveling rock and roller. He was an interpreter of human emotion, a true musical virtuoso. The song became a staple in his live shows, always performed with the same intensity and soul as that first perfect take. Years passed. The Lonely Heart's Serenade remained a timeless classic, a ballad that continued to touch new generations. It was played at weddings and funerals, in quiet moments of reflection and public declarations of love. Its message of enduring hope in the face of loneliness resonated with people from all walks of life. Clara eventually became a legendary joker in her own right. Her name whispered with reverence in the halls of Nashville. She never forgot the kindness of Elvis, the unexpected twist of fate that brought her song to him, or the quiet courage of Millie, who had dared to save her sheet music. She lived a life filled with purpose and creativity, always remembering the powerful lesson learned from her first masterpiece, that the most profound art often emerges from the place where others see only impossibility. The story of The Lonely Heart's Serenade became a legend in the music industry, a testament to the power of a single song, the genius of an extraordinary artist, and the heartwarming triumph of an unsingable dream. It proved that sometimes all it takes is one voice, one take to turn doubt into destiny, and to transform the seemingly impossible into something truly astounding. And for Clara, it was a reminder that her heart, no matter how lonely it felt at times, held the purest melodies of all.